Every so often, you hear a person who you usually consider pretty smart have an opinion that you find lackluster, lacking nuance and absent of the typical sharpness of thought that often characterizes their way of thinking. Of course, this is no slap on them as people generally, as not everyone can be experts on every topic, but coupled with confidence boasted by previous irrelevant successes and a platform such as the internet, and you get people like Neil deGrasse Tyson, a science popularizer whom some people turn to for all their spiritual advice, for some reason, because studying physics will make you an expert on philosophy, theology, and religion. Why not? They're all basically the same thing, right? I have to admit, I'm not exactly a fan of Neil here, but I'm not antagonistic toward his work either. I'm mostly apathetic to it if anything. However, one thing that gives me the irks is when he steps outside his specializations into realms completely unrelated to his expertise, such as politics and religion. And he's still treated as if he were an expert. That is, we give him the same respect as if he were on topics that he were an expert in, when, in fact, in these cases we're considering, he is evidently not. I think this has to do with the culture of scientism that we see today popular, where the rhetoric of science is weaponized to give legitimacy to things as a sort of marketing tool. It is a strange phenomenon, no doubt, but we'll get back to this later, because for now, I just want to actually critique some of Neil's points. Again, I hope I am clear that I don't dislike Neil or think badly of him or anything, but I simply desire to caution people that some of his opinions is simply nothing deeper than what you'd get from any random person you meet at a coffee shop bro, and should be treated as such. Whether you ultimately agree or disagree with him is your opinion and choice. My goal here is simply to show that his takes are merely nothing above and beyond that of the average layperson, specifically on topics such as politics and religion. Okay, so we'll be examining the number one reason why Neil identifies as an atheist here, and show why it's so wrong and stand on shaky grounds in great detail. I think that's been fair to him by bringing forward his best argument, and I will be facing it head on.
If your concept of a creator is someone who's all powerful and all good, that's not an uncommon pairing of powers that you might ascribe to a creator. All powerful and all good. And I look at disasters that afflict Earth and life on Earth. Volcanoes, hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, disease, pestilence, congenital birth defects. You look at this list of ways that life is made miserable on Earth by natural causes. And I just ask, how do you deal with that? So philosophers rose up and said, if there is a God, God is either not all powerful or not all good. I have no problems if, as we probe the origins of things, we bump up into the bearded man. If that shows up, we're good to go. Okay? Not a problem.
What Neil is talking about here is what philosophers call the so-called logical problem of ego. Epicurean's presentation might be the most popular, but J.L. Mackie's argument is the strongest, which we'll face head-on as a steel banning of Tyson here. Though it is highly doubtful that Tyson is yielding or even in fact aware of the strongest version of the argument in the academic philosophical literature. So, one thing that might surprise everyone here is that, and drumroll please, the logical problem of evil is universally considered by philosophers of religion to be a failed argument.
What?
Now, I'm not saying that popularity determines the truth. Indeed, I don't even think most philosophers are relevant experts to the topic of religion. Only at best philosophers of religion. But there is a good reason for their thinking this way. reasons which we will explore here. I want to point out that Tyson here actually cites Epicurus, though the argument might not even be correctly attributed to him in the first place. But in any case, the argument holds that it is logically impossible that both God and evil exist, and since evil exists, then God does not. But we must critically assess and challenge the argument here. Is it really logically impossible that both God and evil exist? Okay, the first thing you note is that there is no explicit contradiction between the two concepts as there is a merit bachelor. In other words, the argument depends on hidden assumptions to even make clear what the alleged contradiction is. There are two hidden assumptions. Firstly, that if God is all-powerful, he can create any world he wants. Secondly, that if God is all-loving, that he would prefer a world without suffering. The issue is then that, are these hidden assumptions true? Not necessarily so. For example, in the first assumption, if God wants to create a world in which people possess free will or libertarian freedom, then God would not be able to freely force someone to not do evil, should the person choose to do evil. But the atheist might object here that why doesn't God simply choose to create a world in which people always freely choose the good? To which a response by Alvin Plamigar, a Christian philosopher, will be enlightening here. I will be quoting from a post from the blog Moral Apologetics, who is led by Dr. David Becker, who is one of the world's leading experts on moral philosophy, which I will also link in the description below. Quote, Plamigar's argument is that it is at least possible, for all we know, that the relevant counterfactuals of creaturely freedom are such that for every libertarianly free creature who is not divine and enjoys morally significant freedom, they would ultimately go wrong with respect to at least one action in every feasible world in which they are instantiated. If this malady, namely Trotsworth depravity, affects Curly, then Plamigar concludes, every world that God can actualize is such that if Curly is significantly free in it, he takes at least one wrong action. This is where Plamigar tightens it up. After establishing this basic case, he refers to the possibility that, for all we know, every creature the essence is afflicted with Trotsworth depravity. That is, left to themselves, human free creatures will always ultimately go wrong at least once. If this is the case, then, while God is willing that evil be prevented and is able to do so, say, by causing or forcing men not to go wrong, given libertarian freedom and complete Trotsworth depravity, Mackey's claim that it is feasible for God to instantiate free creatures who only and always do the good is possibly false. This conclusion may seem weak, but it is important to remember the logical problem of evil is purporting that the existence of God is logically impossible to square with evil. Epicurus' quadrilemma is purporting to discuss all of the relevant logical facts and consequences. If these two solutions are even possible, then the quadrilemma consequences are avoided. End quote. In other words, the logical problem of evil isn't a probability argument, but rather it is purporting to be a logical argument. Namely, it does not say something like theism probably isn't true, but rather something like theism cannot possibly even be true once you understood the propositions in question, akin to a sort of square circle. This, as even atheist philosophers recognize, is a very strong and extravagant claim by the atheist, hence why, contrary to Tyson and many atheists online, they simply don't hold to it. But what about the second assumption, that God would always prefer a world without suffering? How could we possibly know this? We don't know of cases where suffering brought about a greater good that could not have appeared otherwise. For instance, a person could not possibly be brave without truly a threat to be overcome, without being delusional about it. And if it is even logically possible to achieve a greater good from evil, then how can we say that the assumption that God would always prefer a world without suffering is necessarily true? Especially in light of various theologies, such as speculative theism and Irenaeus theologies. How would they not be at least logically possible? Which is all that is needed in order to defeat the logical problem of evil. Because remember, the atheist's claim here is that the two concepts, God and evil, cannot both coexist. Yet through various defenses, we indeed can show that they logically can. That is, there is at least some possible sense in which they exist together. That alone itself debunks the atheist's claim. Let's put it this way. If the atheists say it is not possible, and we show it is indeed possible in some ways, just by that alone, we debunk both the argument and the claims. Indeed, in order for the atheist to even make such a claim, he would need to prove to us that it is logically impossible that free will, transworld depravity, and various theodicies and many other defenses can even possibly be the case, and that it is logically impossible that God has good reasons, perhaps unknown to us, for permitting evil. And how could the atheist possibly prove that? It is entirely pure speculation without evidence here. And that is why even atheist philosophers have given up on the logical problem of evil, because it is simply a burden too heavy to bear. Remember, after all, it is their argument, and hence it is their burden of proof to bear, to prove, something which they clearly cannot do due to not having an omissions of all motive facts. I will be showing a clip from the philosopher William Lane Craig as he puts it best on how to debunk this type of argument.
I think that you need to ask yourself, is the atheist claiming, as Epicurus did, that the existence of God is logically incompatible with the evil and suffering in the world? If that's what the atheist is claiming, then he's got to be presupposing some kind of hidden assumptions that would bring out that contradiction and make it explicit, because these statements are not explicitly contradictory. The problem is no philosopher in the history of the world has ever been able to identify what those hidden assumptions would be that would bring out the contradiction and make it explicit. On the contrary, you can actually prove that these are logically compatible with each other by adding a third proposition, namely, that God has morally sufficient reasons for permitting the evil in the world. As long as that statement is even possibly true, it proves that there's no logical incompatibility between God and the suffering in the world. So the atheist would have to show that it is logically impossible for God to have morally sufficient reasons for permitting the evil and suffering in the world, and no atheist has ever been able to do that. So the logical version of this problem, I think, is widely recognized to have failed.
Now, I want to give credit to Neil here, as he has admitted before that both science and religion can coexist.
So to ask whether they can coexist, the answer is empirically yes.
So he's not like hostile to religion or anything. But his comments on the topic are very superficial, and I think do more harm than good in educating the general public here, for the reasons I have listed previously. But you know who I think is really at fault here? I think the real people at fault are those damn news outlets that keep forcing him to answer the question, even when it seems he's uncomfortable with answering it. It's almost as if he himself acknowledges that he's not supposed to be the expert answering these questions to begin with. I mean, look at him. Look how uncomfortable he is. But they keep generating clicks, so they'll keep baiting him. Unfortunately, it seems even Neil himself is as much of a victim as those who have to listen to him on this topic here. I think the solution to this problem is to recognize when scientists are stepping outside of their expertise and to be cautious accordingly around them. I think many scientists make bad philosophers, as Einstein maintained, but that's another topic for another video. For now, I'll be simply content to link more resources to overcoming this issue. The solution, I think, is that we should familiarize ourselves with the basics of theism, both theists and atheists, so that bad arguments like the one we've just seen wouldn't be able to influence us. My recommendation is a book by a philosopher named Edward Fraser. Like his book, The 5 Proofs for the Existence of God, which ironically enough actually answers all of the topics raised in the original interview. We're not sponsored by anyone here, though we wish we were. But in any case, we hope you enjoyed today's video. Like and subscribe for more content like this as it helps out the channel, and we'll see you in the next one. Stay well and God bless you.